No talks for Baloch. This opinion examines the state's refusal to engage in meaningful dialogue with the Baloch and its consequences. The timing of the call could not have been worse. This opening sentence serves as the thesis statement by emphasizing that the call's timing was disastrously inopportune. It was the last 30 minutes before iftar, when there's no juice left in the gray cells. Iftar refers to the evening meal that breaks the fast during Ramadan. No juice left in the gray cells is a metaphor meaning complete mental exhaustion. This sentence means that the call came at a time when people's minds were too tired to focus. On top of that, it caught me bang in the middle of a delicate operation. The cream cheese frosting was simply refusing to swirl and swish. Caught me bang in the middle is an idiomatic expression meaning exactly during a crucial moment. Delicate operation refers to a precise cooking task. Swirl and swish are descriptive phrases for the desired movement of frosting. This sentence means that the call interrupted an important moment in cooking, heightening the sense of poor timing. But when Azima's drawn-out hello was followed by Balochistan, I put down the knife. Drawn out is an adjective meaning excessively prolonged. Put down the knife is a metaphor meaning to stop one's current task immediately. This sentence means that upon hearing Balochistan, after a lengthy greeting, the speaker immediately ceased his activity, signaling a shift in focus. This was going to be no short call. Would I be able to focus, though? No short call implies that the conversation would be long and demanding. This sentence suggests that the call promised to be lengthy and potentially distracting. This was the time when the brain is geared towards pakoras, not politics. Geared towards means prepared for or focused on. Pakoras are a popular snack during Ramadan. This sentence means that the speaker's mind was preoccupied with food rather than political matters, underscoring the inappropriateness of the timing. The friend at the other end didn't care. This sentence means that the caller was indifferent to the speaker's situation and distractions. But then, Azima has a knack for asking difficult questions that can force one to think even when the brain is in slumber. Has a knack for is an idiomatic expression meaning to be particularly adept at. In slumber is a metaphor indicating a state of low alertness. This sentence means that despite the inconvenient timing, Azima is known for provoking deep thought even when one is not fully awake. She wanted to know whether the state had ever reached out to the Naraz Baloch. Naraz is an Urdu word meaning angry or dissatisfied. This sentence means that Azima inquired if the government had ever attempted to engage with the angry Baloch. Of course they had, I explained. It was during the previous PMLN government that Abdul Malik Baloch was Balochistan chief minister. PMLN refers to the Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz. This sentence means that the speaker confirmed previous outreach efforts during the tenure of a former chief minister. He had been tasked with reaching out to some of the Baloch in exile, and more than once he had narrated how he had made considerable progress, to the extent of getting them to put forward concrete demands, which were also doable in his view. This sentence means that the former chief minister actively engaged exiled Baloch communities and successfully elicited tangible, feasible demands from them. But the establishment made it clear it was neither interested in meeting the demands nor in continuing to talk. This sentence means that the ruling powers decided not to pursue further dialogue or negotiations with the Baloch. But these were not direct talks, she shot back, unlike the ones that had happened with the TTP, where even ceasefires had been negotiated and held, however, briefly. Shot back is an idiomatic expression meaning replied sharply. TTP stands for Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. This sentence means that Azima countered by emphasizing that, in contrast to direct negotiations held with the TTP, engagement with the Baloch has been indirect, but not with the Baloch. This sentence means that, unlike with the TTP, the state has never engaged directly with the Baloch. Few of the Baloch politicians in the provincial and federal legislatures advocate dialogue. This sentence means that only a very small number of Baloch leaders support engaging in discussions. She had a point. This sentence means that Azima's criticism regarding the lack of direct talks with the Baloch was valid. And once the comparison was made with the TTP, the difference was stark. This sentence means that contrasting the approaches to the TTP and the Baloch reveals a significant discrepancy in state policy. There had been many moments when the TTP had been engaged. This sentence means that the state has repeatedly attempted dialogue with the TTP. During the Musharraf years, there was agreement after agreement at a point when the state had not figured out the threat, let alone how to deal with it. Musharraf years refers to the period of Pervez Musharraf's rule. This sentence means that during Musharraf's regime, multiple negotiations with the TTP were made despite a lack of clear strategy. And that image of a general garlanding Nek Mohammed is perhaps one that defines that era. Garlanding is a verb meaning to honor with a garland. This sentence means that the visual of a general presenting a garland to Nek Mohammed symbolized the conciliatory approach of that time. But even later, when the threat assessment was taking shape, there were efforts to engage with them. The agreement which led to the release of Sufi Muhammad in Swat is an example. This sentence means that later negotiations, such as securing Sufi Muhammad's release, demonstrated ongoing, albeit limited, dialogue with the TTP. Later, during the Nawaz Sharif-led PMLN government, a committee was formed and sent off to talk to them. This sentence means that the subsequent government also attempted dialogue through an official committee. Far more recently, negotiations were held when Gen Bajwa was Chief of Army Staff. This sentence means that recent military leadership under Gen Bajwa also engaged in talks with militant groups. But in Balochistan, other than the talks by Dr. Malik, which fell through before they led anywhere, the state has done little in comparison except to stamp out the insurgency. Stamp out is an idiomatic expression, meaning to eliminate completely. This sentence means that in Balochistan, aside from unsuccessful talks by Dr. Malik, the government's response has been limited to using force against the insurgents. Not since Akbar Bugti, with whom talks were held and points agreed upon, only to be scuttled by a dictator who himself was fading away. He was then willing to talk to the PPP, his generals with the TTP, but talks with Bugti were a negotiation too far. Scuttled is a verb meaning deliberately canceled or undermined. This sentence means that previous negotiations with Akbar Bugti collapsed due to authoritarian interference, marking a turning point in state engagement with Baloch leaders. And since the tribal leaders have been replaced by the middle-class leadership, aversion to any kind of engagement has grown. This parenthetical sentence means that the replacement of traditional tribal leadership with middle-class figures has further reduced the willingness to negotiate. On more occasion than one, the state has seen the TTP as an actor that can be spoken to and negotiated with, despite the organization's lack of support in the areas it operates in. But in Balochistan, this option is rarely ever seriously discussed, let alone exercised. This sentence means that while the state is open to dialogue with the TTP, it rarely considers negotiation with the Baloch insurgency. In fact, as the political engineering in the province has grown, this idea has been further delegitimized. Delegitimized means stripped of legitimacy. This sentence means that increasing political manipulation in Balochistan has made genuine dialogue even less likely. Other than some such as Dr. Baloch and BNP Mengel, few of the Baloch politicians in the provincial and federal legislatures advocate dialogue. This sentence means that only a few Baloch leaders, like Dr. Baloch and BNP Mengel, support the idea of dialogue. In fact, those in power expend all their energies arguing against it, because it seems their entire presence and importance is dependent on the Naraz Baloch remaining Naraz. Expend means to use up or invest. This sentence means that ruling elites oppose dialogue because their power relies on keeping the Baloch angry. Most of those we see on our screens would not be seen or given the time of day if elections were even relatively free and fair in Balochistan. This sentence means that the current political figures in Balochistan lack credibility under fair electoral conditions. This in itself is different from the approach in KP, where despite the hostile relationship with the PTI, election results are not upended the way they are in Balochistan. This sentence means that electoral outcomes in KP remain stable, in contrast to the chaotic politics in Balochistan. But I digress. For this divergence in approach to the two insurgencies has existed even when the leadership in Balochistan was not compromised. This sentence means that the differing approaches to the TTP and the Baloch have persisted regardless of leadership issues. And before the dreaded Ray W word is brought in, Let us not forget how the Indian hand was also said to be behind the TTP in the early years. Dreaded means greatly feared. This sentence means that before discussing RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, one should recall allegations of Indian involvement with the TTP. Long before Kulbhushan Jadhav, there was constant lament about Indian consulates in Afghanistan and what that meant for violence in Pakistan. This sentence means that even before the case of Kulbhushan Jadhav, there were ongoing complaints about India's influence on regional violence. In off-the-record conversations, it was said the TTP and others were supported by many an intelligence agency. This sentence means that unofficially, it was rumored that various intelligence agencies backed the TTP. The Great Game was well and truly alive, and Pakistan its primary target. The Great Game is a historical term referring to strategic rivalry in Central Asia. This sentence means that geopolitical competition continues to focus on Pakistan as a key arena. Later, even the emergence of PTM was put down to the dreaded foreign hand or hands. PTM stands for the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement. This sentence means that the rise of PTM was also attributed to external interference. But despite this meddling, the TTP was worth a gupshup with. Gupshup is an informal term meaning casual conversation. This sentence means that despite external interference, the TTP was at least open to negotiation. Neither did the level of violence ever prove reason enough to stop the engagement with the TTP. This sentence means that even high levels of violence did not deter attempts to negotiate with the TTP. According to a BBC story, when the PMLN government formed a committee to engage them in February 2014, more than 100 people had been killed in the previous month. This sentence means that despite significant casualties, the PMLN government still attempted dialogue with the TTP. But bring up the idea of negotiating with the Baloch, and we are told the hijacking of the train shows that the state cannot afford to show any weakness. This sentence means that the train hijacking incident led to the conclusion that any sign of negotiation with the Baloch would be seen as weakness by the state. As if before this incident, the mood was different. This sentence means that there appears to have been a shift in the state's attitude following the hijacking. Somehow in Balochistan, violence and external meddling are reason enough for the state and others to conclude that force is the only answer. This sentence means that in Balochistan, the combination of internal violence and external interference has led to a belief that only military force can resolve the conflict. Even the fact that the insurgents in Balochistan have popular support, unlike the TTP, has not allowed for any exploration of engagement. This sentence means that despite local backing for the Baloch insurgents, the possibility of negotiation is not considered. This is not to say that the Pakistani state, or for that matter, any state, cannot respond to those using violence, but just that in most insurgencies, resolution is usually a result of both negotiations and kinetic operations, as they are called in our neck of the woods. Kinetic operations is a jargon term meaning military actions involving physical force. This sentence means that while force is necessary, successful resolution typically requires both dialogue and military action. But in Balochistan, we defy not just common wisdom, but also what has been practiced elsewhere in Pakistan. This sentence means that Balochistan's approach is an outlier compared to other regions where negotiation has been attempted. Why? Azima had the answer. This sentence means that Azima provided a reason, though the speaker opts not to share it publicly. But it is best not to express opinions publicly these days. This sentence means that current circumstances discourage openly stating controversial views. It is hence best to end with the question. This sentence means that the speaker chooses to conclude by posing a question rather than making a definitive statement. The writer is a journalist. Published in Dawn, March 18, 2025.